Welcome to another session of Business Data Science with Delali. And we've been talking about experimentation in business, and we actually describe 5 steps or 5 general steps to follow in actually running an experiment in business setup. And in the last video, we also discussed the first step, which is basically formulating your hypothesis. Okay, today I want us to talk about a very important step which is often overlooked, which is selecting and aligning on the right business metric to use for the experiment. Selecting and aligning on the right business metric, because guess what, at the end of the day, if you run an experiment and you don't have the right way to even measure the outcome of the experiment, you've wasted everyone's time, right? And you've wasted a lot of resources. And so today, let's think about how to select and align on the right business metric. Honestly, there is no easy formula for this. It usually depends on your situation and your case. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you some general mental models of how to think about selecting the right business metric. Maybe I'll talk about some things to watch out for, some mistakes to watch out for, and really some considerations. Okay, one very important thing in all of this, selecting and aligning on the right metric of experimentation talk, is about properly formulating your hypothesis in the first place. Because if you truly think about your objective and formulate your hypothesis very well, it is actually very easy to get the right primary metric. Okay, now I will explain primary versus secondary metric later, but it is very important to formulate your hypothesis correctly, which is why I would like you to watch the video we did on formulating effective hypothesis in a business experimentation. If you formulate the hypothesis very well, this step becomes very easy, because guess what? The metric of success is already captured in your hypothesis. That is very important. So in an experiment, there are usually 2 types of metrics of interest. Okay, one is the primary metric, which is really the metric that is most directly related to the thing that you are testing or the behavior that you believe your experiment will be changing. Okay, and then there is the secondary metrics, and the secondary metrics can be many, but usually they are things that are somehow connected to the experiment that you are running, or there are some things that you are just very curious about to see if this experiment will be affecting them. So let's start with the primary metric. Okay, how do you think about the primary metric? Like I said, there is no really one size fits all here, but it depends on your situation. But a very easy mental model is that start by stating your null hypothesis again and again, or start by stating your experimentation hypothesis, the hypothesis that you formulated. And by the way, if you have not listened to our video about formulating the right hypothesis, please watch this video, and so you'll be able to actually learn. I'm linking that for you here. But once you actually state your hypothesis over and over again, you'll be able to get a sense of what exactly is going to happen. Okay, so think about the thing that you are testing. What is the mechanical thing that will happen as a result of the treatment you are giving? What is most directly related to that? And then turn that into a measurable outcome. Okay, once you turn that into a measurable outcome, also think about how is that related to your broader business goal. Okay, I think it's very easy to explain this with an example. So let me go straight to an example. Let's say your hypothesis is by implementing personalized subject line, or by including people's name in the subject line, you will increase open rate, or you will increase how much of that email is open, right? Let's say that's your experiment, and so you want to implement some personalized subject line. Okay, now you have to think about, okay, if I'm actually changing subject line and I'm personalizing subject line, either by putting the people's name in the subject line, what is most likely going to happen? Maybe people will actually want to open it because what? This is customized to them. Okay, so now you're thinking about, okay, so what's the metric here? So the mechanics I'm talking about is like the particular treatment that you are giving, what is it likely to do? So in this case, it's likely to cause people to open. So now you think about it. Okay, so should I just count the number of email opens as my metric of success? But the issue with email opens is that, well, this is depending on what, how much volume you send. So you cannot really, just count volumes and compare it between your experiment group and your control group, right? So you then think about, okay, what if I look at the open rate? So out of the people that I send a message to, how many people actually open, right? So that way you can compare this metric with the control group. So then open rate comes to mind. But guess what? The hypothesis itself suggested the metric for you already. So if you have a good hypothesis, you are able to easily what? Get the metric. Okay. Now some cases are not as easy as what I've said, but I think the mental model here is that look specifically at the treatment you are giving. Think about what is going to happen because of this treatment. Think about the most direct effect and turn that into what? A measurable outcome. And that usually is your best bet in your primary metric of success. Now, also think about volume versus rates. Usually volumes are tricky because volume usually means that you have to have exactly the same number of volume or the same number of events or the same number of subjects in each of the treatment and control groups. So rates are actually better. So open rate, click-through rate, things about rates are actually better. Okay, so that's one example. Now let me give you another example. Let's say you are implementing a voice search into your mobile app, and your hypothesis is by implementing a voice search in our mobile app, the app usage will increase. Okay, and now we are thinking, okay, what is the metric of success here? Should it be more app download or what will it be? Well, again, the same principle. Think about what you are doing. In this case, you are implementing what? A new feature, which is voice search into your mobile app. If you have a voice search feature, what is likely to happen? Maybe now many people who are lazy typing can easily use their voice to search. So you have more people using the app, right? So how do you measure more people using the app? Is it more of like number of usages, the time spent in the app, or is it more of like return users? What exactly it is? Think about it. Well, I think a good one is like by implementing that voice search, you are getting more people using. So maybe it's like daily active users, right? That could be. Or maybe what? Repeat users, because the idea is that if the voice search is there, if people use it, they will come back to use it again. Then from here, you can then talk with your business stakeholders and see what they are also thinking. In this case, I think daily active users probably is a better metric, right? But don't go and be thinking things like, oh, let's look at the number of app downloads. Well, number of app downloads is a good metric, but is that really what adding the new feature going to give you, right? Like, well, it all depends. So I think the ultimate idea here is that think about what you are testing and the immediate impact it will have from a mechanic standpoint, and then use that to create an outcome metric, and then think about that over and over again. Again, this is what you must do when you are thinking about what the primary business metric. There is no one formula for all. However, this mental model will help you. Now, what about the secondary metric? Well, the idea of secondary metric is to actually think about what else can happen with this experiment. Outside of the primary and the most direct thing that you are measuring, you must think about what else do I want to achieve, right? what are some of the things that could happen, both good and bad, right? For example, in personalizing, email and then sending a lot of personalized email, people might get angry and opt out. So maybe you want to measure opt-out rate, right? Not that will give you anything, but it will help you understand what is this doing to my customer base, right? That's the bad side, right? Opt-out rate. But maybe the idea is after they open the email, they will be able to click some content and go to my website and buy something. So maybe I want to also think about click-through rate. Right now, click-through rate is not necessarily what I'm testing or what I'm experimenting, but it can be secondary because I want to see if, after they open, they are clicking through, and even if they are going to make purchases. So I may want to look at conversions, right? So these are all what secondary metric, but I cannot say that, oh yeah, conversion rate increase is what I want to look at if my hypothesis is about personalizing the subject line, which the direct effect will be opening, right? Open rate, right? So how do you think about secondary metric? Think about what are the good things that can happen as a result of this experiment, and what are the bad things that can happen, and then based on that, come up with some of the business measures around that. Okay, now formulating business metric can be tricky, and we've done a video on types of business metric and really how to think about business metric, and so I'm linking that also for you to watch here. But ultimately, in an experiment, make sure that you have the primary metric and the set of secondary metrics, which should be what? Good or bad, because an experiment can also lead to what? An unexpected outcome. Okay, now, so few considerations I'd like to leave with you. Okay, number one, make sure that your metric of success that you are measuring, particularly the primary one, make sure that it is directly related to your experiment. Okay, that is very important. And also make sure that your business stakeholders are in the know, that you are discussing with them the metric that you are going to measure. Okay, that is very important. Number two, make sure that this metric is actionable for decision making. Make sure that you can actually come up with something that people can decide on, people can conclude on. This is very important. Now, also ensure that the metric is actually sensitive to the behavior you are changing, right? So let's say you go and run an experiment and you are measuring something like sales increase, right? But the thing that you are doing is not even sensitive to sales, it's about open rate. So why are you going far to sales? It might affect sales, but that's not the primary thing. So make sure that whatever you are using as your primary metric is actually sensitive to the behavior that you're actually experimenting. And finally, make sure that the data for this metric, or the data by which you calculate this metric, is reliable, because there may be certain situations where you may have a good metric but then there's no way to instrument them. Okay, so make sure that your metric has a good way to provide reliable data for analysis. Okay, now I will end by telling you some good practices and some not so much good practices. Okay, the first one is make sure that you have one clear primary metric. Okay, this is very important. Make sure that you have one clear primary metric for the experiment. Don't have too many metrics as your primary metric. It doesn't even make sense. Get the main metric for your experiment. Okay, and then number two, have a lot of discussions and debate with yourself and your stakeholders about this metric, if it makes sense practically to measure and to act on. Okay, and then consider what might go wrong in the experiment. Okay, what might go wrong to affect this metric. Think about that in advance. Okay, debate with people, look at peer reviewers, review your thinking with them. Okay, and then also think about what are the potential follow-ups you can do. Now, what this will do to you is that it will help you think about some other metric that might be relevant that you are not considering. These are some of the good things to do when thinking about how to come up with the right business metric for an experiment. Now, there are some very bad things that I recommend do not do. Number one, do not always use a particular metric in your department as the metric to use for every experiment. I have seen people that always use just that metric. For example, conversion rate. Anything they are doing is about conversion rate, or anything they are doing is about sales per customer. Please don't do that. It is not every experiment that will improve what? Sales per customer. So make sure that you are not always using that one metric, always for every experiment. Okay. Number two, don't have too many metrics. Okay. Do not have too many metrics for your experiment. You will confuse your stakeholders, you will confuse your analysts, and at the end of the day, you will waste a lot of time. Okay. Finally, sometimes we think a lot and then we end up thinking about metrics that make sense for subpopulations that we are testing. Okay, subpopulations. So when you are running an experiment on a population, make sure that you are not coming up with metrics that are only relevant to certain subpopulations. You can use those metrics as like secondary metric or segment and basically cut your analysis by those segments, but make sure you don't end up using metrics that are only relevant to subpopulations as your primary metric. I hope this is helpful, but like I said, the only way you can actually understand these things is actually by doing them and debating yourself and looking for peer review and all of that. I hope this is helpful. Again, we are going to discuss the step number 3, which is actually designing the experiment. Watch out for that video. Thank you. Bye-bye.